I'm going to start right now with the foreword, like a preface, where the author tells us a little bit of something. And he says, "Many persons have asked me why the space visitors should have chosen me for contact rather than some other individual whom they considered eminently better qualified for such a contact than myself. Why then infer should a space visitors have picked so insignificant a nonentity as I for their revelations? In all humility, I tell you that I too have asked both the space visitors and myself that very question many times. And it is only within recent months that I have begun to understand fully just why I was chosen. But this is not the place in this book to disclose the reasons for their choice. After you have finished the book, however, you will have the answer. It is up to you then to decide whether or not you agree with the saucer beings in their choice of contact. Thus I shall begin by telling you something of my early life and the space visitors' first contact with me back in the year 1946, when I was totally unaware that I first came under their observation. My childhood was the usual happy, carefree childhood of most American boys. I joined in the less strenuous games, attended school, and was fairly good in my studies, although I was always frail and in poor health. Fortunately, my family was in fairly comfortable circumstances, and they and my two indulgent uncles saw to it that I always had the best medical attention available. My youthful trouble was diagnosed as constitutional inadequacy, and its symptoms were greatly physical weakness, lassitude, lack of appetite, and malnutrition. Hence, I tired very easily, and the slightest physical effort often left me weak and exhausted. I suffered from severe migraine headaches, and as I grew older, it seemed at times that every nerve and muscle in my body ached with excruciating pain. When I was in 9th grade, the doctors advised that I discontinue school and continue my studies at home. This arrangement was highly satisfactory with me, for I had always been intensely interested in all branches of science. At home, I was able to devote my entire time to study these subjects. With plenty of rest and on a weight-building diet, I gained strength, and within a year, the doctors believed I was well enough to return to school. But as my family had suffered some financial reverses in the meantime, it was decided that it would be best if I went to work for a while. I heartily approved. My first job was with my uncle's flooring and stucco company. He hired me as an estimator salesman, as I was not equal to any heavy work. I liked the work and enjoyed getting out and meeting people. All in all, I got along pretty well, even though I was considered just a kid. In my spare time, I continued to study all the books I could get hold of on scientific subjects. In 1936, I met Mabel Borgianini, an attractive Italian girl who is a direct descendant of a famous Italian Borgias. From the first, both of us knew that we were meant for each other. Her happy, cheerful disposition helped me to keep from brooding over my health and physical inability to accomplish all of the things that I longed to do. It was the happiest day of my life when we were married. About a year later, our first son, Raymond, was born, and our cup of happiness was full. A little later, I suffered a complete physical breakdown and was forced to give up my job. My weight fell alarmingly from 150 to 103 pounds, and I was so weak that I could scarcely sit up. After a number of medical examinations and complicated tests, the doctors decided I was suffering from a nervovascular disturbance. They prescribed complete rest and continuous medical attention. Thus, I entered a new world, a white world of doctors, nurses, and hospital beds. For 18 long months, I was confined to bed. My body was racked with excruciating pains, and I was so utterly exhausted that I could not even read. Medical science was doing everything possible for me, but I knew that my doctors didn't believe that I would ever pull through. Frankly, I didn't much care whether I lived or died. Life was no longer desirable. To lie day after day on a white hospital cot with a body flayed with pain and too exhausted even to think is indeed a living hell. Death, I felt, could only mean release from my pain. Especially was the confinement difficult for me to bear, as I had always loved the out of doors, the sparkle of the sunshine, the whispers of the leaves in the woods, and the music of the woodland streams. Sometimes I prayed that I might die and escape the pain and awful weariness that ached in my muscles. But weeks lengthened into months, and gradually I began to improve. Finally, I was able to sit up again and then to walk. It was like being reborn. I even began to take an interest in my science books once more. And last came the joyous day when I was able to leave the hospital and return home. All through those long months of confinement, the faith and encouragement of my wife and my family never failed. Mabel was with me through it all, and if it hadn't been for her love and understanding, I doubt if I would have ever made it. My body was still racked with pain, but I had learned to bear that. The good thing was that the terrible exhaustion and trembling weakness was gone, so I was able to be up and about. Although my family tried to dissuade me, I insisted upon going back to work on my old job almost immediately. I had been inactive so long that I wanted more than anything to be busy again. After I returned to work, I took up courses in night school. The old insatiable hunger for knowledge was gnawing at my very soul. I realized that science had discovered much, but there were still so many things to be learned, so many of nature's secrets yet to be revealed. I was obsessed with learning the true nature of the atom, discovering a cure for the virus diseases, and especially for polio, that most ghastly of all crippling diseases. I felt that a satisfactory explanation for the creation and operation of the entire universe was yet to be worked out. What was the great mystery of creation of matter, or the actual origin of the atom? These and other similar enigmas echoed in my brain night and day. The field of electricity and electromagnetic phenomena interested me in particular, probably because from earliest childhood I had an acute fear or phobia about lightning. During an electrical storm, I suffered not only actual bodily pain, but mental perturbation and distress. Thus I became well versed in atmospheric static electricity. I conducted some simple experiments on my own. I noticed that all fowl, and especially chickens, are nervous and apprehensive during an impending thunderstorm. It was obvious from my own reactions that they too experienced definite physical symptoms because of atmospheric conditions. Also, I discovered that chickens are subject to a range paralysis, which in every respect parallels infantile paralysis in human beings. From my studies and experiments in this field, I believe that I had discovered certain facts that might be highly significant in the treatment of polio. In my enthusiasm, I wrote a long, detailed letter on the subject to President Franklin Roosevelt, who was then in the White House. Through the efforts of President Roosevelt, my theories were heard by Dr. John L. Levan, Junior Director of Research, National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis. Dr. Levan was interested and referred me to Dr. Joseph Stokes, of the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia who was working along the vitamin therapy line of treatment for polio, but I never called on Dr. Stokes. From what I learned on his work, I knew that his ideas were directly opposed to my own theory that a certain vitamin of the B complex group was largely responsible for the nutrition of the polio virus. Returning to my studies and home experiments, I became interested in fungi and the atmospheric conditions affecting them. I studied the wild mushrooms and the particular atmospheric conditions which resulted in their sudden, erratic growth. From the mushrooms, I turned to molds. It was my belief that molds are a negative form of life which leach on living matter by an elusive, subtle process of mutation. At that time, we were well into World War II. Penicillin had been discovered, but it was yet only a magic word and a deep mystery to the public. No books or reports were able on the subject. But by then, I was familiar with the characteristics of fungi. In my experiments, I discovered that one of the most common molds could be made to produce chemicals indefinitely if kept in proper nutrition and temperature. It was then that I decided to see what structural changes would occur in the mold Aspergillus clavatus in the upper atmosphere. On August 4th, 1946, I took cultures of the mold in 3 stages of growth: embryonic, half-mature, and mature. I placed the molds in baskets and attached the baskets to 18 Navy-type balloons and prepared to send them aloft. But through an unfortunate accident, all balloons broke away prematurely, carrying the baskets with the molds aloft with no means of retrieving them. My long months of strenuous effort and careful planning were hopelessly lost. Heartsick, I sighed heavily as I watched the balloons and my precious molds ascending higher and higher into the clear blue sky. It was a perfect day, just the kind of weather I had longed for to make my test, but now everything was irreparably lost. My family and a number of friends and neighbors were with me watching the experiment. Also on hand were a reporter and a photographer from the Trenton Daily newspapers. That's the Trenton Daily newspapers. This is August 4th, 1946. If you want to verify it, verify it. Everyone was silent, staring into the heavens, watching the balloons growing smaller and smaller as they gained altitude. Everyone there, and especially Mabel and my father-in-law, knew how keenly disappointed I was. Mabel put her arm comfortingly about my shoulders and murmured, "It's all right, Orphy, you can try again." It was then that my father-in-law, Alfred Borgianini, noticed a craft in the sky and called out, "Look! There's an airplane, Orfeo. Maybe it will follow your balloons." Everyone there saw the object, and it was the consensus that it had been attracted to the spot by a group of ascending balloons. But as it hovered and circled overhead, we were all soon aware that it was no ordinary airplane. In the first place, it maneuvered in an amazingly graceful and effortless manner. Then, as we gained a clear view of it, we were startled to see that it did not have the familiar outline of any known type of aircraft. It was definitely circular in appearance and glistened in the sunshine. We looked at each other in surprise and bewilderment, and the photographer tried to get some shots of the thing. Mabel exclaimed, "Why, I never saw such an airplane before. It's round and it doesn't have any wings." Everyone agreed, and we continued to stare as it gained altitude and appeared to follow after the balloons until it too vanished from our sight. For several clays afterward, we discussed the strange object, but as in the case of most mysteries, we forgot all about it within a week or two. Today, however, any one of those persons who were with me that day will vouch for the authenticity of that strange craft.